Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toilisted Titles, episode 226. This is our redraft rankings running back episode part 2. Last week, we were able to get through a total of 11 running backs. So this week, we're going to bring you all the way through RB25. That'll get you through your top 2 RBs on your fantasy team. So your RB1s and your RB2s, plus maybe a guy for your flex. And again, just as always with all of our rankings, you'll be able to see all of them on our website, toilistedtitles.com. The guys on our redraft ranks team, we actually ranked our top 60 running backs. So there's plenty on there for you for those of you that are in deeper redraft leagues especially. And I didn't really write up anything that's in the news right now, but you guys see, I've got Mark with me again. He was with me for the quarterbacks episode. Appreciate you coming on, my man. But I don't know if there's anything in the news necessarily you want to talk about. The only thing I kind of stands out is Rashee Rice with the issue at the bar earlier this month. The guy that was injured has stated he does not want to press charges. I mean, that's helpful, but other than that, most of the news we've already gotten to on Sunday Night Live a couple of nights ago, and not really a whole lot of news going on. But have you seen anything that you want to add on that end, Mark?
Not really. That's all I had about the first thing that's went right for Rashee Rice this offseason, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the biggest news here is, what was your golf score today?
40. We only played nine holes.
Nice. That's nice, man. Right on. And even if it were 60 and you could tell us 40, nobody would ever know the difference. So that's even better.
Oh, let's go a little lower then, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Love it. All right. So before we totally get into the rankings and the breakdowns here, guys, I'm going to pay some bills. For those that aren't already aware, Rival Fantasy is the newest evolution in fantasy sports. Rival's all-in-one fantasy platform has changed the fantasy sports landscape. From fantasy bingo, where you mark off boxes of achievements that your players accomplish on the field, to season-long and best ball leagues, to mock drafts and challenges, and more. They have the perfect user-friendly website and app for you. So send a challenge to your friend or send a challenge to your rival and tell them to put their money where their mouth is. But your first deposit of up to $200 will be matched, plus an additional $25 just for using that link, joinrival.com/titletribe. That's joinrival.com/titletribe. And we've got Wicked in the house. Yeah, I got a little bit of an upgrade. I finally got that degree about a week or two ago, so now I'm out there trying to hustle and get a job. So people want to see a more clean-shaven teacher, but I don't understand why, because like the beard hid most of the ugly. So like I think it's even more scary for the kids to see this version of Justin. But I mean, I don't know. But thanks for tuning in, Dylan. Appreciate you chiming in there. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. All right. Again, I want to, as a matter of fact, speaking of Dylan, that's the next thing on the show notes here is Wicked's 32 league tournament. So there's going to be 32 different leagues, 12-team leagues for each one of them. And the winner of each of those get to move on to a ultimate tournament showdown at the end of the season for a shot at winning a $4,000 prize if we can fill every single league. I believe it's $15 to enter. So you guys can reach out to him. That's at Wicked_Dynasty. And then I'm filling my 32 team charity league. $10 to enter, half of that goes to charity. So it's not much of a pot, but it's also kind of a quasi hybrid. So you don't have to do a whole lot of work with the league, but you get to choose which of the 32 NFL teams you want to represent, and then we're going to have a draft and we'll have fun with it. But reach out to me at JustinFF_ for that. Mark, anything else that you want to discuss that I might be missing here before we get into our rankings?
The only thing I feel like I have to defend my ETN ranking from your last week's show. Fortunately, I couldn't be there, but I can't just throw a rank 17 out there and then not defend it. So,
Yeah, so before you get started with that, just to give you all an idea, Wicked and AJ were or no, Nate was the highest on ETN, having him ranked 5th overall. Wicked and AJ have him at 6th. I have him at 7. Coach has him at 8. And then all the way back there at 17 is Mark. So this is why, like, because I kind of called him out for it, and I mean maybe I shouldn't have because he wasn't on to defend himself, but now he's ready. He's come with some ammo.
yep, absolutely. So last year, ETN had 253.4 fantasy points. He finished 3rd overall as the running back. The year before, he only had 193 points and finished 17. What was different about the 2 years? Yardage? No. He had more yardage rushing the year before than he did last year with 47 less carries. 47 less carries the year before last year, and he outrushed himself this year. The biggest difference between the points was 7 touchdowns and about 150 yards receiving. Now, in the offseason, we like to talk about coach speech and all that, but like Doug Peterson has gone out of his way anytime he can talk about it on how he wants to get ETN less carries and Bigsby involved. Even recently, he went on to say that he feels like there's more yards out there for ETN to get, which you would think, okay, that means they're going to get him the ball more. They want him to get more yards, right? No, I think what he's saying is ETN's yards per carry last year were 3.8. That's not great for a top tier running back. So I think he thinks ETN will be fresher with the less amount of carries. So he might be able to put up similar yardage as to last year. But I think if you drop him in carries, where he's going to miss out are on the touchdowns. Because I think they're going to try to get Bigsby involved more on the short yardage around the goal line where ETN's not going to take as much of a beating. So I think if you take about 30, 40 carries away from ETN and give them to Bigsby, I mean, sure, ETN's going to be fine in the yardage category, but I think you're going to see a significant drop in the touchdowns. So I think that's where I have him a lot lower than everybody else. But I mean, to me, his value is on the carries. He was number 3 running back based on getting his 267 carries last year. So I don't know. I just think that's going to drop.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair enough. I will say that Tank Bigsby's yards per carry were actually even less than
Yeah.
than
Well, he didn't
ETN.
get that
So
many opportunities. He had that fumble in the
right,
first game of the year, and then they gave him like 1 to 2 carries a game until
right.
like the last couple weeks of the season. So
Right, right. I'm just saying that there is a possibility too that a lot of that was offensive line related, or offensive scheme related, or game flow. We don't really know on that end, but I'm kind of obviously I'm in line with Wicked because we had pretty much the same ranking on him, falling for that Bigsby hype 2 years in a row. Heard for months last offseason that Bigsby was gonna get the goal line work. It ain't happening. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. Don't get me wrong. I think I'm falling more somewhere in the middle with that, where I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more Bigsby this season than we did last season. But even a hell of a lot more could still potentially not be enough for me to go down that far on ETN. And that's why I didn't really drop ETN all that far in my rankings. I have him at where did I say 7th? So I mean, where he finished as what would you say he finished as last year?
last year he was 3 overall.
Right. So I've got him down to 7th because of that
Yeah.
Bigsby
Yeah.
taking some, and he'll even take some of the goal line work, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But Uh, so I think Bigsby is one of those guys I want to get late in the draft. Like
Oh,
I think
100%.
the value is going to be there because there is potential for that. And then if it doesn't pan out, then he's the guy you're cutting to pick up, your quarterback because you went, in one quarterback leagues you waited until the 14th
Yeah.
round to get stuck with someone. Now you're going to stream quarterback. So you always got to have the guy at the end that you're going to cut. If there's potential for him to be a boom guy, then you'll just cut the guy before him. So,
Yeah.
but
And
all right,
the only thing I'll say about the hype, the hype for Bigsby last year was more coming from us just being excited about where he got drafted and what we saw in college. Versus now, the coaches and the team are starting to talk about him more, and that's the only reason I'm getting behind it. Because last year they said that Bigsby, the coaches said that Bigsby was a little out of his realm, like he wasn't picking up blocks and he
right,
just wasn't seeing things right.
right.
I'm going on base that he's learned that over the past year.
Fair enough. It'll be interesting to see for sure. But you and I can have a bathroom board bet on that one. I say that there's no way that ETN even finishes. And let's go points per game because injuries can always happen. Points per game, ETN does not finish worse than 10th overall as a running back.
I'm game. Yeah,
All
100%.
right, cool. I'll mark
I
that
got
one down
it.
later after the show. For now, guys, don't forget to go back. If you missed it last week, we did go through our top 11 running backs. Myself, Wicked, and Matt Donnelly of Roto Baller and Betspurts. He actually finished, Matt Donnelly finished second overall in Fantasy Pros rankings a couple of years back. He's still Fantasy Pros ranker, one of the top guys on their site. So the guy knows his rankings, and he went over some of his rankings as well with us last week in those top 11. Again, that's toylistedtitles.com if you want to check out just the rankings themselves for these running backs. But it's important to note that we did base these rankings off of full PPR fantasy formats, but the stats and the opinions really do kind of spill over sometimes into other formats as well. You may just have to adjust your scoring as needed. And don't forget, I mean, you can reach out to either one of us or anybody on the team, and we can help you with adjusting your scoring as needed. But also a reminder that we discussed the top 12 quarterbacks 2 weeks ago. The reason I didn't want to go further than 12 quarterbacks is because we based it off of one quarterback leagues. You really shouldn't be drafting any of those guys anyway. Wait until around 10 to 14 and just pick up a couple guys to stream. You're going to have guys out there that really shouldn't be that low. Their combined streaming are going to outscore the others. But for tonight, let's roll with it. Number 12 on our list, Joe Mixon. He goes to Houston. So new uniform, same old Joe. Well, I mean, you kind of hope so if you've had him in the past. So 5th in carries last season, 3rd in red zone touches, 11th in fantasy points per game, and 6th in total touchdowns with 12. 8th in rushing yards and 12th in receiving yards. He played all 17 games last season, finishing as the RB11 overall. Nate is the highest on him at 9, and Coach is the lowest at 16. So that's ranging anywhere from a low end RB1 to a high end RB2. So that's not too much disparity there. Let's see, I have him at 10, just behind Nate. I think that offense is going to help him excel. You have him just behind me at 12, Mark, and then Wicked at 14, AJ at 15. So my thoughts here, all the great stats above, and he's only going to be 28 when the season starts, and he's going to have an even better offense around him than what he had in Cincinnati, in my opinion. Low risk, safe floor, which is perfect for a low end RB1. If you're drafting more towards the front end of the draft and you go with a wide receiver in a PPR format in that first round, then you want somebody that's going to be safe as your RB1. And this is about where Mixon's going to fall. So it's just perfect right there. If you're drafting at the tail end of the first round and you get a much better running back, in that first round, he's a safe guy you can have a second, because that allows you the ability to go risky in that first round, with a guy that could be potentially a boomer bust. Maybe you think ETN's going to be a bust like Mark does, and maybe not bust, but you know what I'm saying, not worth his value. maybe you want to get a safer guy like Mixon. So he's falling in right there at that nice risk right there. So, Mark, what do you say about him?
So I said after the bye week, I'm not sure that's exactly where Singletary took over last year, but once Singletary took over the running back game, he averaged 11.58 points per game, and that put him right at the bottom of a running back 2 for points per game. And let's be honest, Mixon is 100 times the running back that Singletary is. And when you add Diggs to that offense, and you got to respect Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, that's just going to open up the running game even that much more. So I feel like I'm probably a little low on Mixon, but I just feel like he's going to have plenty of touchdown opportunities and a lot of yardage in that offense.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Like I said, we have them ranked right there within 2 of each other, and I feel the same way. Like at 10, I feel like it's a little low. Like he's that kind of guy where he only needs a little bit of a hole to make it look like it's a big hole, right? And just like you said, with that high-powered passing game, there should naturally just be holes already there. So with him being as good as he was in Cincinnati with not many holes to hit, imagine what he could do. So the potential's there. I like it. Rashad White is tied as our RB13 right now. We have him tied with Isaiah Pacheco. So they're both ranked 13th. We're going to talk about Rashad White first. Second most carries in the league. He led. Second most carries in the league, led to the fantasy RB10 overall in points per game, not overall, RB10 in points per game, 990 yards rushing. Third in receiving yards, which was a huge bump for him, with 549 and only 6 carries of 15 yards or more. So he didn't really have those big breakout carries, but he did play in all 17 games, which is a nice boost, and he finished as the RB4 overall. Let's see. AJ is the highest on him at 9. And then it's going to be Wicked at 13, Coach at 14. You and I both have him ranked at 15. And then Nate has him all the way down at 19. Again, Nate is just hating on guys that I don't want him to hate on. So I'll have to send him a message. But what do you got to say about Rashad White here, my man?
So I put him in a similar category to where I had ETN. I think he's a running back by volume, and he gets plenty of volume. He had 272 carries last year. He also gets a lot in the passing game as well. Now, Bucky Irving's a better running back than anything they had last year. So I think that'll bring him down a little bit, but I don't think he's going to take a lot. I still think Rashad's going to get plenty of carries to have you at a fringe running back 1, top of the running back 2.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in 13 of 17 games last season, he was an RB2 or better. In 9 of 17 games, he was an RB1. So this is because of the 360 rushing yard attempts by running backs on the team last season. He had over 75% of them. So just like you said, it's sheer volume. We got White for cheap last year in redraft because of the whole Sean Tucker season talk that we were hearing, all that Sean Tucker hype. And now I'm hearing people talk up that 4th round pick, Bucky Irving, that you just mentioned out of Oregon. But like it's going to be his turn this year. But this makes me feel good. Like I feel like having Bucky Irving there, and maybe you still have some Sean Tucker truthers out there that can't give him up. We're going to be able to get White for cheaper than he really should go yet again. And again, here's the overall ranking. We have him listed at 13, right? So there's going to be some guys in some of your home redraft leagues that may not even think of him as that high because of the Bucky Irving going there. And then he has the potential to be a top 5 running back because of all the sheer volume. So you might get him for a discount again, although it's not going to be as big of a discount as it was last season. So he's not going to be getting 75% of the carries. He's not going to go from that to being a backup or anything. I'm not saying like that, but he may lose some carries. And most of his success was on the basis of sheer volume, just as you said. But even if he is locked or knocked down all the way back to 50% of the carries over the 75% that he was getting, he's still a low end RB2 at worst. And you're kind of purchasing him here at low end RB1, high end RB2. So it's not like it's a huge bust if he does drop down a lot. And I don't see him getting dropped all the way down to 50% either. So I think it's another one of those safe guys just by volume. And again, Isaiah Pacheco also tied for 13th. He had the 7th most red zone touches with the 8th highest opportunity share, 18th in rushing yards, and 22nd in receiving yards. So kind of just middle of the road there on rushing and receiving yards, but 14th in fantasy points per game. He played in 14 games and finished as the RB15 overall. I'm the lowest on him at 20. Mark, you're the highest on him at 10. So I feel like that RB15 is another good potential bathroom board bet right there. If you wanted to kind of go in the middle there, you can take 15 or more, and I'll go below RB15. But Coach and Nate both have him at RB15. Wicked has him at 12, AJ at 13. But I'm curious to see why you're so high on him first, and then I'll let you all know why I'm so low.
So I think a lot of it is opportunity. And from what I saw last year, while the Chiefs were struggling, I feel like Pacheco, when they started to lean on him a little more, is when they started to turn the season around. And they leaned on him a lot in the playoffs as well. And I know the passing game is always going to be key with Mahomes, but I feel like Kelsey's getting older. Rashee Rice, we don't know what's going to happen with suspension there. They signed Hollywood Brown, and now they got Xavier Worthy. But I feel like they're going to have to lean on the running back and then let Mahomes do his thing afterwards. So I feel like he's going to have a lot of opportunities for touchdowns, and the yardage is going to be there. The only thing I worry about is McKinnon getting healthy and how much they use him.
Okay, I'm trying to look up something real quick because here we go. Okay. See, I don't think it was true. So I believe that there were rumors out there that Travis Kelce said that he was threatening to leave the Chiefs unless Harrison Butker was fired. Again, if you haven't heard the news about Harrison Butker, you didn't listen Sunday night when we talked a little bit more in depth about it. But he said some pretty bad things that he really shouldn't have said at a college commencement speech. Let's see. I'm just trying to read through this to make sure it's factual before I make the claim on the Kelce thing, but it doesn't look to me like that was completely true. I think Kelce may have said some remarks along the lines of like he didn't necessarily support what Buckner said, but I don't think that it went as far as to him saying he would leave Kansas City. So I don't want to report on that just yet until we find out more. But that, I mean, we're talking fantasy running backs here on this show, and we've got Pacheco there, and he would greatly, be affected by something like that if it were to happen. Again, I don't think it would, but
well, let's be honest. Even if it was true, like Kelce, like they would get rid of Bucker, right? Before they let Kelce walk, you would think.
I mean, you would think they should, but also Bucker has the Players Association on his side. Like, I'm not sure if you have the union, like, is that enough of a
That's true.
reason? Can they call that conduct detrimental to the team, or something like that? Like what would they have to do to be able to, or claim to be able to say that that's enough for them to let him go with the union backing him up? So obviously, who knows what's going to happen with all that? Personally, I wouldn't shed a tear if they canned the kicker, and we'll talk more about Kelsey's situation when we get to tight ends in a couple weeks. But honestly, I think that we're going to see a little bit more of what we saw from Kelce last season, where they kind of rested him more during the regular season. and he was still a top tier tight end. But he was ready for the playoffs, and it showed. Like I think we might see that a lot from a lot of their stars, including their number one running back, which is another part of the reason why I'm kind of down on Pacheco. Also, I've not been high on running backs in Kansas City for several years now. They just never seem to make me happy when they're on my team. They always seem to underperform when I think they're going to perform. But Pacheco is on an upward trajectory, though, in terms of fantasy output. He was more consistent in year 2 and is the main receiving back for his pass happy Mahomes. So there is a lot working in his favor, and I totally acknowledge all that. But even with all of that, since Mahomes has come on the scene, Kansas City running backs are capped on production by design. That offense is ran through the passing game, which helps open up running lanes. But they do not utilize enough running backs for me to trust them as fantasy RB1s. That's why I had him ranked definitely as an RB2, and I'm glad that the overall consensus was right there in the RB2 range, although tied for 13th. You can make an argument for RB1. I get it. But there are also concerns for me in that his backups in KC suffered a lot of injuries last year. So he did have a lot more opportunities last season than you would traditionally see an RB1 for Kansas City, because they usually like to split that running game a lot more back there. So with healthier other backups back there, I can see more of a split for Pacheco that's going to kind of take him down a notch or two. Would not be surprised if he finished as an RB1. I really would, because he is talented enough. It's just a matter of, I feel like there has to be enough storylines fall into place for him to be able to hit that I'm just not personally seeing. Let's see. James Cook, Buffalo, only a 55% snap share, but still had the fourth most yards on the season with 1,122 yards, and 8th in receiving yards with 445. He only had 4 goal line carries all season, 19th in fantasy points per game. Cook played all 17 games, finishing as the RB12 on the season. Let's see. Mark, you had him ranked as 16th, where we have him tied at 15th. So pretty much right there. And myself and AJ had him at 14th. So we're all right there together. Coach had him at 17th, so a little bit lower. Nate was the lowest at 20. Wicked, if you're still watching, maybe give us a little reason for why you have him ranked so high. He's got James Cook listed as his 8th overall running back. I kind of feel like he's drinking the Kool-Aid there, but with Josh Allen there, I kind of feel like he's probably not going to get a whole lot of goal line carries any year. But for me, Cook is talented enough, but a combination of Josh Allen taking rushes, especially at the goal line, and Sean McDermott's offense seemingly requiring a need for a split backfield in crazy situations where there shouldn't be, it's enough to scare me away from Cook as an RB1. He's also a bit inconsistent, but his big playability in a big offense where he will likely see a boost in targets is enough for me to still want to see him at right around that high end RB2, especially if my RB1 is solid and reliable. So if I'm already perfectly content and happy with my RB1 that I got in the first round, and I'm now, in the third, maybe early fourth round, and James Cook's still sitting there, I'm going to be a lot less hesitant to take him as my RB2, even with the likelihood of not getting a lot of goal line carries. So I don't know. What do you think? You have him ranked pretty much about the same as me, but do you have any other different reasoning?
I mean, the only thing I was going to say is that honestly, he should be where Wicked has him around 8. But I don't trust Buffalo at all for everything like you were saying. And there was a game last year I watched where, and I hate the old school coach mentality. Cook was having a good game. He fumbled the ball, and then they didn't give him a single carry for the rest of the game because of the fumble. Like, players don't learn from that. I hate that mentality. And then, just like you said, trotting out running backs that don't need to be there. Like, they're trotting out Leonard Fournette at the end of the season when Cook could be carrying the ball. Like, I just don't trust Buffalo to do what they should with James. So that's why I have him so low.
And I could even somewhat see the Fournette thing if you're trying to say that you're wanting to save Cook to help you in a playoff run or something, kind of like what Kansas City does with Kelsey and their stars. But the difference there is that they were still trying to win those games at the end of the season to
100%.
get the playoff seeds. Like they needed those games, and you have 40-year-old Leonard Fournette out there coughing up the ball. It didn't make any sense to me. But here he is still in the house. Dylan says Cook is going to have lots of opportunity in the offense that is going to need to depend more on the run. And that is true. That's part of what I was saying in my comment. Without Diggs being there, that volume in the passing game also is going to go up for him. Let's see. Has talent, and he will be an RB1 in 2024. I say he will not be, so it sounds like Wicked and I have a board bet here. Cook RB1. That's a no for me and a yes for Wicked. All right. Love this. We got all kinds of bathroom boards popping up. The next one is a guy that I'm going to have to explain myself about, and I'm a little scared to have to explain myself about it because I feel like I could be very, very wrong. But Kenneth Walker tied at 15th. Talented guy that I actually really like, and I'm still kind of shocked that I have him so low, but I've got my reasonings, and I don't necessarily. I'm almost trying to convince myself, but it's 54.5% snap share, 19th in rushing yards per game, not 19th in rushing yards overall, but 19th in rushing yards per game, 21st in receiving yards per game. The Seahawks ran the second fewest rushing plays last season. Don't really see that changing a heck of a lot. Fourth most yards per reception. So he was definitely good when he had an open field in the passing game. The third most evaded tackles, and this is and second highest in juke rate. So this is what I'm saying. Like this dude is talented enough to be a crazy good running back if they can just get that offensive line solid. If they could just get utilize him in the right way, get him in that open field, like. He could be an incredible running back in the league. He could easily be top 8 for fantasy purposes and top 2 or 3 any given week with the talent that he has. My overall thoughts here is that Walker's individual numbers that are mostly based off of raw individual ability are really good. The dude is an athlete, but the team around him isn't there yet. And the best running back situations typically require the team around you to succeed to help for fantasy numbers as well. And what I mean by that is if your team stinks, then you're down more. You're not going to get as much opportunity for your running back to run the football because you're going to be throwing more. And even if your running back is good at receiving the ball, you're going to need him to stay back and block more if you're down by more. So you need your team to be successful usually to get some pretty successful numbers in the running back situation, at least for half of the game. He's probably better than RB19 overall that I ranked him, but having 7 games outside of an RB2 finish last season and not seeing much more light at the end of the tunnel in the way of team improvements around him this offseason makes me want to avoid him. Or having him on my roster at all because of that inconsistency. So if for whatever reason I can get him as like a high-end RB3, then you have that opportunity that maybe they fix some stuff and he's going to have a great season. I'm cool with it. So that's why I have him ranked so low. At RB19, I'm probably not going to get him, and I'm okay with that. But talk me out of this. Tell me why I'm wrong here, Mark.
I wouldn't say you're necessarily wrong. I have him a little higher than you, but I think talent wise, he's a clear running back 1. I think he's got a lot of things working against him, like you said, though. Bad team, new coaching staff. So that's another question for me. I don't know how the new coaching staff's going to utilize their running back. Are they going to give him the bulk of the carries, or are they going to split with Charbonnet? Who knows? And the other thing is he's 2 years in the NFL and he's missed games in both seasons. He's already got a little injury bug here and there. Mm-hmm. And it's not that he's missing a lot of games or anything like that. I think he missed 2 on both years. But the problem you have there with those little injuries is not only are you missing games with him, he's getting hurt the game before. So you have him in there, and then you're questioning throughout the season, can I play him this week? Is he rushing back? Is he healthy? And it just puts you into a rough situation more than I want to be in for a running back one. So that's why I have him outside of there.
Yep, all fair points. The next guy we have is ranked 17th overall by our consensus. 26th in fantasy points per game last season was Aaron Jones, who's now with a new team, the Minnesota Vikings. Only 2 games last year as an RB1 all season. I wish I could find metrics where he was good at last season, but unfortunately they just didn't exist. He played in 11 games last year, finishing as the RB37 overall. And now, okay, so going to Minnesota, he has a whole new situation there. This is a guy where after I looked at my rankings and I was worried about how I had Kenneth Walker listed so low, but then I've got Aaron Jones just barely listed ahead of him at 17. I highly am considering bumping up um, um, Walker just a little bit. But at the same time, with the new situation, and now they're going to be relying on Sam Darnold. Maybe they have to go to the passing game a little bit more. Like, there's just so many questions. So in this range of guys, like, this is kind of like the no man zone for me. Like, I'm not taking running backs in this area most likely anyway. Those of you that know me for redraft, I go early and often with the running backs. I'm going to come out of the first 4 rounds with 3 running backs. And there's a high probability that if I have an early pick, first, second, third, maybe fourth overall, then all 3 of my first picks are going to be running back before I finally go wide receiver. And that's so that I can avoid guys like this that have so many question marks. Again, you do that, you're sacrificing your wide receiver spot. I get it, but we're going to find out in our wide receiver episodes over the next couple of weeks that it's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's a lot of deeper wide receivers, in my opinion, that can help keep you on that winning path. But I had Aaron Jones ranked 17th, which is myself and Wicked both did, which is where his average is for our consensus. Coach was the lowest at 19th, and AJ was at 18th, so all right there with us. You and Nate were a little bit higher at 13th, though, so not much, though. Like, we're all still kind of right there together. But what do you think about Aaron Jones this season?
So I have him right on the fringe as a running back 1, running back 2, and I know you said it was hard to find anything that he did good last year. The one thing I'll give you is he had 10 games last year where he rushed for over 100 yards. That sounds pretty crazy for where he finished on the year, but 10 games over 100 yards, and 2 of them were in the playoffs when the game means the most. I feel like going to Minnesota, he doesn't have much competition for carries. Ty Chandler was okay, but nothing to write home about. And with JJ there, if he's going to be the quarterback from week 1, like, they're going to want to run the ball a lot for a rookie quarterback. So I feel like the volume is going to be there for him. He's going to have every opportunity to succeed. I think it'll come down to if he stays healthy or not.
And he did only have 3 touchdowns last season, so
Yeah.
that you're looking at, a positive flow, a positive bounce back there. So so that could potentially help as well, for sure. So all right, it's time for us to bring on Wicked here real quick for a little Gilded ad.
Looking for a place to connect with fellow fantasy football fanatics? Well, look no further than our Gilded server. Join the Title Tribe, where you can chat, strategize, and debate about all things football. Whether you're swapping lineup advice, discussing the latest trades, or fearlessly defending your favorite player, our Gilded server is the perfect spot to hang out with like-minded fans. Our Gilded server is free to join, and the link can be found in the video description or on our website at toiletstotitles.com. We look forward to seeing you in the tribe. Are you ready to take over your fantasy leagues and become a champion? Get the edge you need and join the Toilets to Titles Patreon today to get exclusive access to our T2T staff, weekly waiver wire shows, and Patreon-exclusive leagues like our signature Frankenstank League. Members enjoy other amazing benefits, such as monthly giveaways featuring autographed jerseys, collectibles, Yeti coolers, and more. Sign up now for as little as $9.99 per month and dominate your fantasy leagues like never before. Visit patreon.com/toilets to titles and let us help take your teams to the championship this season.
All right, next up on our consensus ranking is number 18, David Montgomery. So he finished with the 5th most red zone touches last season. It is worthy to note that his red zone touches did drop in favor of Gibbs as the season went on. But even by the end of the season, Monty was still getting more red zone touches than Gibbs at the end of the season. It's just that gap got a lot closer towards the end of the season. Only 3 games where he didn't finish as an RB2 or better. So he finished as an RB2 or better in all but 3 games. And one of those was the game that he left early due to an injury. He had the 4th most touchdowns. Most other stats suggest that he is very touchdown dependent if Gibbs is healthy. So according to the numbers anyway, if Gibbs stays healthy and Montgomery doesn't get all those touchdowns, then you might be in trouble for drafting him kind of high. Even with that being said, myself and Wicked still have him ranked the highest at 16, though. It's still only 16, so that's like mid-level RB1 or RB2 here. So Nate is the lowest at 22, so we're all right there together. You and Coach have him at 18, and AJ has him at 17. My thoughts here: this will be Montgomery's 6th season in the NFL, but he's still only 27 years old. He has finished as an RB2 or better in each of the last 4 years in fantasy points per game. Even when he wasn't always the main starter, he's still finishing as RB2 or better. Gibbs was incredible last season to the point that he is now our consensus RB5. We all think that highly of Gibbs to put him at RB5 overall in our consensus rankings here at T2T. But Montgomery will still get enough production to be a solid RB2 nearly every single week. And if Gibbs happens to get injured, then Monty now will become a mid to low end RB1 or better nearly virtually every single week, and you're getting him here at an RB2 price. So that's kind of why I bump him up just a little bit in my rankings, probably more so than everybody else on the team. But just that idea that maybe if there's an injury, he's right there. But otherwise, like, he's still a solid RB2 regardless. So do you have anything to add to Montgomery?
I almost feel bad having him at 18. I feel like that's a little low, but I just feel everybody I have above him has a higher upside because he has Gibbs there. But like, to me, Montgomery might be your safest running back 2 you could draft. Like, if you ask me, give me one player that I know is going to finish as a running back 2, I would say it's Montgomery. Because, yes, he is touchdown dependent, but he only had 3 games without a touchdown last year. Only 3 games. So I think the touchdowns you can actually count on because they're going to continue to give them. Sure, Gibbs is going to get his as well, but they have Montgomery there for a reason. They're not going to not use him. So,
yeah, absolutely. And with that high-powered offense, they can both still have red zone touches and red zone targets and still both be very fantasy productive. Absolutely. Ramondre Stevenson comes in as our RB19. Stevenson finished with less impressive stats per game in 2023 than he did in 2022. 1 less reception per game, 1 less yard per carry, and 2.6 fantasy points per game less. He was the RB27 overall in fantasy points per game last season while splitting nearly even snap shares with Zeke Elliott in a lot of games. Stevenson played in 12 games, finishing as the RB35 overall and RB27 in points per game. So pretty disappointing season for Stevenson fans who had him the year before that were pleasantly surprised with his production and output. I'm interested to see what you have to say about him first. You have him ranked right there, right at the mark of 19, where we have him, our consensus averages. I'm the second highest at 13, with Coach being the highest at 12. Wicked and Nate have him at 25, AJ at 20. So before I justify why I have him so high, I want to kind of hear, because you have him right there at the average. So your reasoning probably makes sense.
Yeah, so I would have him lower, but like you said, shedding Zeke, I think his opportunity share is going to go up. I'm not a big Antonio Gibson guy. I feel like he's good out of the passing game, but I don't like him much outside of that. So I feel like um, the majority share will go to Ramondre. My question just is, how good of a team are they going to be? And how much are they going to actually be able to run the ball? But
Yeah,
because Zeke's gone, I have him up at 19.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. How good of a team are they going to be because of my reasoning here? I have down that Stevenson gets to shake the split of Zeke, but now he gets a highly underrated Antonio Gibson. You and I obviously see a little bit differently about Antonio Gibson. I actually kind of like him. And I feel like Gibson will still battle for touches, but I don't think it'll be nearly the split that he had with Zeke. However, Gibson does have a very similar yearly stat line and capabilities as Ramondre does over the course of their career, except Ramondre appears to be much better at the goal line. So he will get those goal line carries, and that's why I have him bumped up at the 13th spot for me for running backs. But then now your comments, which makes perfectly good sense about how good are the Patriots really going to be. If they're not really good enough to get you down to that goal line very often, then the goal line carries aren't going to really help Ramondre very often. But I do think that he gets to see more percentage of the goal line snaps than he got to with Zeke. But I like to think that with Drake May, they're going to be a little bit better, at moving the ball, a little bit better with the offense. He'll get a better percentage of the goal line carries, and I feel strongly that he will finish as a pretty solid RB2 most weeks. I think he's going to be that consistent guy. I also think I'm going to get him a little bit cheaper because of the season he had last year. So this is a guy that I can kind of see being my RB3 or even RB4 on a lot of teams, where after an injury or two, I can take him off of a good game and trade him, use him as trade bait to pick up a piece like a wide receiver that I'm going to need, because I always push wide receiver for later. So that's kind of my plan for Ramondre at this point. DeAndre Swift, Chicago now. He's with Chicago. In Philly last season, Swift had the fifth most rushing yards at 1,049 yards. 11th in breakaway runs and 24th in fantasy points per game. He played in all of the fantasy relevant games, sitting out only in week 18, and finished as the RB20 overall. You and me both have him ranked at 21, which is pretty much right about where the overall consensus is at 20. Coach and AJ is the lowest, but only at 22. Wicked has him at 18, and Nate is the highest at 17. So we are all within 5 spots of where DeAndre Swift is ranked on our rankings, and that's pretty damn close considering that it's the 20th spot. So I think we all kind of feel very similar on D Swift here. So real quick, many of the per snap stats that Swift had in Detroit were better in 2022 than he had in 2023 with Philly. A lot of that was due to his lower efficiency rating in the snaps from the shotgun. But yet in Philly, the offense ran 93% of his runs came out of the shotgun formation. This is because head coach Nick Sirianni just does not allow room for creativity in his offense. And yes, that's a shot at the guy that we all know I hate. That was only 40% in Detroit. He only ran 40% of his runs out of the shotgun in Detroit and had a much better efficiency rate because of it. Now, last year, Chicago fell in between those numbers. Right around 60% of their carries were out of the shotgun formation. So it's uncertain with this new look Bears offense that we're going to see just how much of their runs are going to come out of the shotgun, but we can pretty much guarantee it's going to be far less than 93%, like he saw last season. So the fact that he's so much more efficient when not out of the shotgun makes me feel like we're going to see a much better efficiency rate from Swift this next season than what we saw last season. But I can also see Swift losing more carries to guys in the committee like Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. I know Johnson was underutilized last season, but he was a rookie. He's a super talented running back. I really like Roschon Johnson, and I really touted him up last season, and I still don't even like him as much as I like Khalil Herbert. So I feel like it's a really solid 2-3 to have on your roster to not be using. So he is explosive, and Swift is explosive enough and has enough potential to be a high-end RB2, low-end RB1 any given week. And that I'm okay with if I can get him as my low end RB2 or even like an RB3 on my roster where I'm utilizing him in the flex. I'm perfectly happy with that. Now, and again, remember in redraft, I draft RBs early and often. So if I'm drafting Swift, most likely he's probably going to be making my RB3 spot or maybe even a valuable flex guy. That makes him more worth the risk again. So if you have those guys that are more risky, you can take them a little bit later if you're confident in those earlier picks. So I know I keep saying that, but RBs are my thing in redraft, man, and I've won a lot of championships by making RBs my thing. So just remember that. All right, if you got kind of a tie there, just remember that in the back of your head. It's harder to replace a good running back than it is to replace a good wide receiver in redraft fantasy football. Now, dynasty, a little different situation. Do you have anything to add about DeAndre Swift?
For me, it comes down to not trusting Chicago again. Like you said, they have two other good running backs there with them, and I feel like we already saw him underutilize a running back with David Montgomery before he left. He comes out, and I think he was like top 5 running back his second year in the league, and then every season after that, like they just decided to give him the ball sparingly and throw other guys in. So I don't know. I don't trust them to give Swift the work he needs to be higher.
Very good. All right, I want to start off this next one, number 21, Alvin Kamara, by stating that I promise after we're done, we've gone through all the episodes because we're probably going to have to go through 2, maybe 3 episodes of wide receivers. Then we're going to have an episode where we talk tight ends, kickers, and team defense all at once. Probably we could probably get through all of them in one episode. After that, we're going to go back and re-rank our draft pick, or I mean our ranks as we go, because a lot of things change in the offseason and a lot of opinions change, and we get to see more numbers and we start to hear from the coaches and get more of a visual of what the offense or defense is going to look like. So we are going to adjust these, and I can promise you, even after just looking at these numbers for Alvin Kamara, I'm already too low on him, and I apologize. I'm probably going to be bumping him up at least a few spots, maybe even several spots, but Nate is the highest at 18. I might even see myself going ahead of that after reading some stuff that I read today when doing the show notes. But I have him ranked at 22, and Wicked has him the lowest at 24, so I'm closer to the low end. You are closer to the high end at 20. Coach has him right at 21, where he's average, and AJ at 19. Here's my reasoning now. Jamal Williams, he's toast. We already know this. He's done. His one touchdown last season was the controversial one at the very end, last play of the last game, where the team gave him the touchdown when the other team thought that they were going to kneel it. We know the story. But Kendre Miller will be a nice replacement for Kamara when he moves on from New Orleans. But for now, Kendre Miller is still just the backup. And in my mind, I think the reason that I had Kamara ranked so low is because I am very high on Kendre Miller to have a huge bounce back season. But when I went back and looked at the numbers from last year, considering he was injured and all that, Kendre Miller didn't really have an opportunity to be effective last season. So a huge upgrade this season still isn't that much. So I think I was just kind of over accounting for what I thought Kendre Miller was going to do. I need to go back. I need to check myself. That's why we do these episodes. That's why we're constantly filtering through the numbers. But I'm gonna bump Kendre Miller back a little bit more and bump up Kamara just a little bit more. Kamara, second in targets and running backs last season, number 2 in targets, 9th in red zone touches, third in fantasy points per game, second in receptions, and sixth in receiving yards. In PPR especially, and even in non-PPR, receptions are still crucial for running backs that get a lot of targets and receptions, and he's done it his entire career. Why am I overreacting to this or thinking that he's going to lose all these to Kendre Miller? I don't know, but he played in 13 games, finishing as the RB11 overall last season. So he missed 4 games and still finished as the RB11 overall. Like, when will I stop underestimating this guy? So I am going to bump him up a little bit more because I don't see that offense overall changing a heck of a lot. I can see them still dumping it off a lot to Kamara, and I'm just going to kind of slow my roll on Kendre Miller for another season. But do you have anything to add about Kamara, my man?
So I'm right where I said I wanted to be with him, above consensus, but I'm probably going to monitor ADP and see where he's going and make sure I have him above that, because he's a guy I want in the second round. To get a guy like that could be a league winner that late. My only concern with him is, well, like you said, he got tons of targets in the passing game, but his yardage wasn't there in the receiving game like we were used to. That was the only downside. But in PPR, that doesn't matter because catching 12 balls a game, that's 12 points right there for you, doing nothing with yardage. So, yeah, I'm going to monitor ADP, and I'm going to make sure I have him just a little bit above where he's going so I can get him in the second round.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I did say that he was 6th overall in receiving yards, but for running backs, that was still only 466 yards. So that was a good 200 yards less than what we're really used to seeing out of him. So that's just letting everybody know that when you hear me say that he was the 6th highest in receiving yards, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a huge number of receiving yards for running backs. So he just did better than a lot of other guys that don't really catch the ball. So
and I'm just
was a fair
purely
point.
talking on what we're used to from him.
All right, I'm going to let you talk about James Conner first. He was 6th. This is our number 22 consensus running back. He was 6th in rushing yards, 12th in touchdowns, 13th in fantasy points per game, 45th in receiving yards, and 38th in receptions. He played in 13 games, finishing as the RB18 overall. Mark, you were the lowest on him at 31. That's why I'm going to have you talk about him first. The next lowest was me at 24, which was really close to our consensus average. Wicked has him at the consensus average of 22. AJ and Nate have him at 21, and Coach was the highest at 20. So between the other rest of us, we're all within 4 of him at the 22nd rank. That's pretty good. So you're considerably lower on him. So why do you hate James Conner so much? What did his family do to you?
I don't hate James Conner. For me, it's Trey Benson. I love Trey Benson. I think I have him at 34, right under Conner. So for me, I just feel like Benson's going to take a lot away from Conner. And the question with Conner is always, is he going to stay healthy? So, I mean, I feel like Trey Benson can be a steal if Conner were to go down. So I'm at the point where I'm targeting Benson. So I have him at 31. So most drafts, I'm never even going to come close to sniffing James Conner. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And just to throw it out there, so you have Benson ranked 34th overall, which is highest of all of us rankers. So you're being consistent with what you're saying here. So that you being higher on Benson is the reason why you're lower on Conner, and that makes perfectly good sense. Like, I can't even fault you for that. I can't be mad at you like I was about the whole ETN thing. But my thoughts here on Conner is that he's never been a sexy fantasy option, right? Like, he's always been a pretty steady RB2, like just a nice steady option to have at RB2. And usually it's more middle to even higher end RB2, but he never really does much more than that. Like, his high games are low end RB1, his low games are low end RB2. So they're all like, all of his games are about the same. boring Cardinals game to watch. So so that's where the Cardinals spending this third round pick on Trey Benson is scary. Like a third round pick typically isn't that big of an overpay or a reach on a player, but for running backs it kind of is. Like most of your better running backs a lot of times will even go in the fourth round or even fifth round. So they paid up. They went to the third round. They wanted to make sure they got him so that the Cowboys couldn't or whoever. But I believe Connor will still get enough of a run for at least this first rookie season of Benson to still have that safe, normal Connor floor. But instead of having him more as a high-end RB2, low-end RB2, or high to middle RB2, I have him more at the low-end RB2. That's Trey Benson is why I have him down to 24. I just think it's going to take Benson a little longer than you probably think, and that's our difference. Either way, having Connor – you're just not going to end up with Connor is the difference.
Exactly.
I might get him as a low end, probably for me, like a low end RB3, high end RB4 by the way that I draft running backs. So if he doesn't pan out, it doesn't hurt me. Right. So that's the difference, really. You just don't want Connor. And there's nothing wrong with that if you really like Benson. Nick Chubb. Chubb finished as the RB10 overall in week 1 last season or against the Bengals. But then after that, week 2, he goes out. We all saw it on prime time. That knee was bending in a direction that it should not be bending, and he was out for the season. So now, consensus ranked 23. You have him ranked 23. Coach 28. I have him at 30, so I'm almost the lowest, but AJ's a little lower at 31. Wicked has him at 20. Nate actually has him at 14. And this doesn't surprise me. And for those of you that have followed this show since day one, Nate is all about Nick Chubb. Like there were several drafts, not mock drafts, not just mock drafts, but regular drafts or any drafts where like he will take Nick Chubb a full 2 or 3 rounds before he should be taken. And so we all have those guys, right? And Nick Chubb is just his guy. But my thought is that ACL injury, man. So I have a very strict rule when it comes to ACL injuries, especially when it's multiple ligaments and not just the ACL. It takes a full year to really get back on the field and start practicing effectively at full speed, which he should see that early on in the season. But then it takes about another 6 months for us to really see the player that he actually was almost as good as he was before. It's rare you ever see that they were as good as they were before, but anymore in today's medicine, they can get pretty close. And some do actually still excel and are as good. But Chubb will likely be ready, if not by week 1, then early in the 2024 season. But I'm going to give him the rest of the 2024 season before I'm actually confident enough to actually trust him. So I'm not saying that I won't start him from time to time as a backup or a flex in tight spots if I have him on my roster, and I might maybe get him at 30 if other people are as scared of him as I am, but I'm probably not getting him at 30 anyway. Just because I don't want to have that frustration and that stress all season long, waiting to see, is this going to be the week? Is this going to be the week? Is this going to be the week? So, and just that inconsistency of a guy coming back from a knee injury is not something that I want at my running back position. So that's why I have him at 30. Like I said, you're at the average of 23. Are you as worried about the injury, or am I just more worried than most?
I just think it's impossible to rank him truly right now. Like he's going to be one of the guys you got to watch the whole offseason and right before your draft, see where he's at, how he's practicing. Is he going to be ready week 1? Because I basically ranked him as he's going to be ready for week 1. And this is where I would have him if he's ready for week 1, just because kind of along the same lines of Kamara, like to get him around 20 to 23, if he's healthy, is huge. What he can do for your team. But chances are, I don't think he's going to be ready week 1.
Yeah.
So
and that's fair.
And if that's the case, I drop him down a lot lower. But like comparing him to Najee and stuff like that, if I know he's going to be ready to go week 1, I'm taking him over a guy like Najee Harris.
Right. And we're going to be adjusting these rankings just like I said with Kamara. Like so these are what we feel right now, but if we get closer to week 1 and he's looking like he's having a heck of a training camp, I'm going to bump him up from 30th, right? Or if it
Yeah,
looks like he's taking a setback or he's not quite going to earn that starting spot just yet, then you're going to bump him down. So it's all way
100%.
too early rankings, but definitely with him, the only real concern is that knee for sure. Najee Harris, Pittsburgh. He's our 24th rank. And I said we're going to get through 25. We're going to get through 25. We're going to do these last two before we call it a night. The Steelers ran the ball the 9th most in the league last season. Harris had the 6th most carries and the 8th most red zone touches in the league. He had the 7th the 7th most rushing yards, but only 44th in receiving yards. That's crucial for fantasy purposes. 34th in receptions and 30th in fantasy points per game. So even with as good as his rushing game was, he still took a huge hit in fantasy because of that receiving. Harris played in all 17 games last season, finishing as the RB23 overall, one spot behind Jaylen Warren, the backup for Pittsburgh, who finishes the RB22 overall last season and also played in all 17 games. Again, Harris's consensus ranking is 24th here. Nate has him 24. Wicked has him 21. You have him 22. Coach and AJ have him 23. You're all right there together and all right there close to the consensus. I have him all the way back at 34. I'm the one that has to explain myself here, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me what you like about Najee first, or hate about him, because it's not like 22 is a great ranking here. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying that you're, overly optimistic about him or anything. You're right there at the consensus, but then I'll explain myself.
So the thing with Najee for me is that offensive line was god awful last year. Najee would get the ball and he was immediately hit. And the reason Warren succeeded so much more than Harris, because that's not Najee's style. Warren's style, the quick juke, get out of the way, is more apt for a bad offensive line. When you're a downhill runner and you want to just plow through people, it doesn't help when you're getting touched 5 yards behind the offensive line. They did the Steelers revamped their offensive line this offseason, so I think that helps them. I think Russell Wilson is an upgrade over Kenny Pickett, so the better quarterback play should help them. It's just going to depend on how the new offensive line does. I think if they can create some space, I think Najee is still a good running back when he can get downhill. The question is, can he get downhill? Or is it going to be same old story behind the line?
And to your point, he had the 5th most stuffed runs in the league last year. He got stuffed 49 times. It's a lot of times of getting stuffed. And that was even with him only having he had a light front. What they call a light front is where you have just a few people in the box on defense, only 30% of the time. So, and he still had the 5th most stuff. So well, pretty much what that relates to is just like you said, that's really bad offensive line play. Like if you're not getting that many people in the box and you're still not able to get past the line of scrimmage, then there's something seriously wrong with your offensive line. So to your credit, I'll definitely take that into consideration when I redo my rankings. But for right now, I have him all the way down at 34 because Najee's fantasy value in PPR is extremely hampered. And as we know, that's extremely important for fantasy running backs. And it's hampered by Jaylen Warren, who is the receiving down back, just as you said, who had more than twice as many receptions as Najee. So he is the true receiving down back. Warren also had 1.2 more yards per rushing attempt as well. So where Harris was getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage, we saw Jaylen come in with the same offensive line, and like you said, maybe he has better juke moves. Maybe he can avoid that first guy a little bit more. He was able to get a total of 1.2 more yards per rush with that same offensive line. In my mind, that tells me if they've improved the offensive line and Najee's able to get some traction and get some more yards, then why shouldn't Warren be able to get some more traction, get some more yards, get a juke, and still get a little bit more? So for me, I still keep thinking that Warren's just going to be the guy, because he's more of a I don't want to say he's more of a well-rounded back, because they're definitely a split here. But I think with the combination of Fields and Wilson, with them being able to move the ball more, Harris is probably going to get more red zone opportunity, which helps him. But also B, they're moving the ball more because they're able to pass the ball more effectively, which also helps Warren. So I think both of these guys could actually make a little bit of a jump in my rankings overall. But I believe that not only is Warren the new hotness in Pittsburgh, he will likely outscore Najee on the season in fantasy. Warren, again, the last time it was really close. I'm saying considerably enough to acknowledge, hey, 50 fantasy points, right? More than Najee, in my opinion. For us to be able to say that Warren is the better value pick here, in my opinion. I'm tired of Najee Harris constantly letting me down. It's another angle that I wrote down here, because you fall for the guy, you see him get 24 points one week, 30 points the next week. Then you start him against a weak run defense and he gets 3 points. He's just one of those guys that's constantly letting me down. So that's another reason I probably ranked him a little bit lower. Just like some of those other guys, I don't want him on my team. So there's that. The last guy, Zamir White for Vegas. In a backup role last season, Zamir played in all 17 games, finishing with only 4.3 fantasy points per game. Jacobs was the guy that got all of the carries there. So Zamir White was the RB 56 overall. My only thoughts I wrote down here is that with very little competition for carries, White should be a weekly flex start, just sheerly out of opportunity alone. I have him ranked 28th, which is only 3 behind the consensus. Coach has him right at the consensus of 25, Wicked at 26, AJ Nate 27. You're only 1 under the consensus at 24. So again, another one of we're all within 4 of each other when he's ranked at 25. So we're all super close. I feel like we all probably kind of feel the same way about Zamir White.
Yeah. I feel like, I have him right at the bottom of the running back too. I was actually looking at it today, and I really want to bump him up a little bit just because, like you said, he has no competition for carries. They brought in Alexander Madison, but let's be honest. The thing I want to know is who's going to be the quarterback. I almost feel like his value goes up if they give the job to Minshew, where I don't know how good they're of a team they're going to be with O'Connell at the helm. So I feel like that limits some of his upside.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree for sure. All right. That does it for tonight, guys. We've gone through our top 25 running backs. So next week, we're going to be starting the wide receivers. And we're going to get through as many. We're going to start at number 1 and work our way down and get through as many of the wide receivers as possible. Spoiler alert, that first one, CeeDee Lamb as of right now. But we're still waiting on Nate to finish his rankings and Mark to do his wide receiver rankings as well. But as of right now, CeeDee Lamb is in that first spot, and we'll see where we go from there. But let's see. I have 3 other running backs that are on this list. I'm gonna finish and complete those write-ups on them, post them to the website within the next day or two. And those are number 26 overall. We have Tony Pollard for Tennessee. We've got Raheem Mostert at 27 and Javonte Williams at 28. I think you guys might be a little bit surprised at what I have to say about Javonte Williams there in my write-up. So make sure you go and check us out at toylisttitles.com in the next couple of days. Read the write-up on the quarterbacks that we posted a couple weeks ago. Read the write-up on the running backs that will be posted in a few days, and let us know what you think in that Gilded server. Man, Mark, I appreciate you coming on with me, buddy. This is always fun, and 100%. You know how boring this would be if I was just reading it by myself. So is that your golf shirt? You only wear it when you play golf?
No, I wore it to work too, so I get to wear polos to work. So went straight from work to the golf course.
All right. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate you joining, and have a great night.